Now, the challenge of upgrading infrastructure isn't just confined to the UAE. A new report suggests that GCC countries have got to shell out some $290 billion, making sure their transport and energy networks are up to scratch. But when you're spending such a massive amount of money, how can you be sure you're spending it in the most critical areas? Earlier, I spoke to Raghu, Vice President of Research at the Kuwait Financial Centre, and I asked him why it's taken countries so long to realise that investment is necessary.
If you trace back the oil boom that was there in the previous two oil booms in 1980s and 1990s, much of the surplus that the region generated was invested outside the region. So not much of that surplus was actually invested in building the economies. So they did miss the boat the first time around. But when the boom happened again now, they got very much wiser. Remember, this is one of the few regions in the world that's growing at the fastest rate. So now there is no choice but to start looking at this problem very seriously.
Why has planning been so poor?
The principal reason behind that is the volatility of the oil price. See, economic policy makers in a country has to have some sort of a tool by which they can extrapolate and forecast what would be their income. Okay, this is possible in a normal economy that has a very diversified stream of income. But for an economy where 90% of your revenues accrue from oil, just one commodity whose price is controlled by international markets, so they are sitting on such a base which is very volatile, very hard to predict, and therefore very hard to provide for.
What sort of projects do we need to see in the region then?
You have to focus on the basic infrastructure like power, water, and roads, railways, communication. These are the major things that require to be attended to right away.
Now, oil prices are fluctuating a lot. They're moving up and down. Will that impact, do you think, on the amount of investment?
If oil prices were to fall to $60, then the worst thing that can happen to them is that the budget will get balanced. But if oil prices were to fall even lower than the $60, then probably the question arises as to whether they have to start slowing down their investment. Now, what is the probability for oil prices to fall below $60? I don't bet on that definitely. I mean, yes, oil prices are at their historical high, but will that recede back to $40, $50? Experts say no, and I also feel that that's not the probability we're talking about. So from a financing point of view, they are very, very comfortable, and therefore the process is going to go on. It's not going to stop. It's just started and it's going to get better, actually.
Raghu of the Kuwait Financial Centre speaking to me earlier. Now, that's almost it for this week's programme, but before we go, let's take a look at how the region's main financial markets have been performing. And while those figures are up on the screen, let me remind you of our email address. It's thebiz@bbc.co.uk. Do email us with any comments or questions you might have about any of the topics that we've been covering on our programmes. Now, next week, we'll be reporting from Turkey. What has the country's recent political turbulence done to